So, systemic racism in America. Does anybody know kind of what that is before we begin?
It's related to almost every aspect of life. So it's in housing, it's in criminal justice or any court case. It's in trying to buy products, trying to start companies. It's basically in a lot of facets of life.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else want to share? No? All right. So we're going to be talking about systemic racism. Obviously, it impacts not almost, every part of life for people who are not white. And when I was reading into it, I learned a lot of things that I never really thought about. And so I hope you guys do the same. And I hope after this meeting, you guys continue to do research on this because I think it's something really important. And like Esther said, it seeps into every single crevice of people's everyday lives. So we're going to be talking about a few topics. But first of all, systemic racism means because it's integrated in nearly every way people move through society in the policies and practices that institutions like banks, schools, companies, governments, agencies, and law enforcement. I don't know if that made sense, but basically it's just is a part of everyday life, but it doesn't have to be. There's a lot of things I'm going to be talking about. The few I'm going to be talking about are employment, government representation, household income, education, criminal legislation, and those are the ones that I'm going to be talking about, but there are a lot more other areas, so that's why I encourage you guys to do your own research. And I will be sending videos at the end of this meeting too. I sent them in the Instagram group message. Hold on. Emily's going to join. All right, so. Employment and systemic racism. I'm just going to read these off the slides, and then we can talk about each slide after a little bit. So as of 2020, only 4 Fortune 500 companies have Black CEOs. And on the average Black worker earned just 62% of what the average white worker made. And then one interesting study is from a Harvard study. They found that Black and Asian Americans, when they whitened their resumes, such as using American or white-sounding names, they got more callbacks for corporate interviews, and 25% of Black candidates received callbacks from their whitened resumes, while only 10% got callbacks when they left ethnic details on their resume. So even though we have passed laws that make it so you can't discriminate, there are prejudices, and even if people are aware of them or not, there are prejudices and racism, especially in employment, and it's really hard for Black people to get employed for many reasons, which we're going to be talking about. But it starts off even something as small as their name. Is there anything that anybody wants to? Any questions or anything?
I was going to say that implicit bias probably tunes into a lot of this.
Absolutely, yeah. And after every slide, I'm gonna ask, but it's totally okay if you guys are no, I'm good, because it is such it's a complex topic. And so government representation, and basically we have 535 voting members of Congress, and only 57 of them are Black. I don't know what the exact percentage of that is, but that is a tiny number compared to 535. And so we do not have the appropriate amount of representation in our government that would allow for systemic racism to go away.
Yeah, it's about 11%.
Yeah, 11%. That's not enough.
And I would definitely bet that the percent of Black people in America is definitely higher than 11%, which means that they're being underrepresented.
13, but I'm not sure what the exact number is.
Yeah.
But still, that's not enough.
No.
It also affects household income. So the median household income for white Americans in 2018 was $70,000, and for Black Americans, it was $41,000. And the overall poverty rate for white Americans was 8%, and for Black Americans, it was 20.7%. There's a clear disparity there. And then based on income figures from 2018, it would take the median Black woman worker 226 extra days into a new year to earn what a median white male worker made in the previous year. So almost a whole year to make what a white guy would make. Are there any questions on that one? I'm sending more videos, so that one is one that I really want to talk more about, but I'm sending videos for that.
Okay.
So education and systemic racism. Before I begin this, does anybody know about systemic racism in education?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah. What would you like to say?
So I took, by the end of high school, I took 12 AP classes, and I don't think in any single AP class I saw more than 2 Black people at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And then in honors, it was kind of more mixed. And then non-honors was basically just people of color, not only limited to Black people, but it was nobody in that school by themselves were racist, really. We were like a super liberal school, but systemically, all of the lower achieving people were people of color in classes that weren't highly ranked on GPA.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Hold on, wait 1 second. I'm trying to figure out how to get the Zoom thing. Hold on 1 second. This is like in the way. I'm just gonna press that. Okay. So a study by the Department of Education showed that in 2013, Black high school students were only a bit more than half as likely as white students to have any advanced placement or IB credit, and only about a third as likely to have AP IB credit for math. Like Esther said, you didn't really see many Black students in AP classes. So here's a chart that I found. So basically, in all subjects, it's 40% white kids and 23% Black kids. And these are the AP IB classes. And in math specifically, it's 70% white kids and 6% Black kids. And in science, it's 16% white kids and 8% Black kids. Hold on, how do I get back to that? So only 15%, this is so annoying trying to get the Zoom thing. I don't know why I can't just stay at the top.
We can't see any of what you're clicking, so
Okay,
I don't think
sorry.
it can either. So unless it bothers you, don't bother.
Okay, cool. Only 15% of Black students from less educated households went on to finish college, well below the 25% of white children who earned a degree. And so these next two quotes are from the Ben & Jerry's website. I didn't really know that they had a whole thing on systemic racism, but it is actually really interesting to read. And so the two quotes for them was, when Black students and white students commit similar infractions, Black students are suspended and expelled 3 times more often than white students. And while the Supreme Court's ruling in 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education case, officially did away with the doctrine of separate but equal, many school systems remain segregated. Some studies even suggest that segregation may be worsening, opens a new window with schools that are anything but equal. Sorry, I didn't say that correctly. And schools attended predominantly by people of color are chronically underfunded. I don't know what the whole opens a new window thing is. But schools that are predominantly white get funding. Schools that are predominantly Black tend to get less funding. And specifically with AP/IB programs, not having that credit and not having, and like having the like things on your record, like being suspended and expelled, that doesn't really make any kid want to go to college and continue education if everything that they've had in their whole educational career has been against them. And so just the system is against them since the very beginning when they're required to go to school. Any questions about education and systemic racism? No? All right, so this one is a lot. There's a lot of points for this one. So here's a few topics that we'll be talking about. Obviously, there are a lot more topics in systemic racism and criminal legislation, but the field we'll be talking about are police stops, police searches, police using force during arrests, juvenile arrests, arrests in the transgender community, arrests for drugs, prosecution charges, incarceration of women, sentencing, I spelled it right, to life without parole, hiring people with criminal records, and eliminating the right to vote. So police stops. Black men in America are twice the rate of white men to be involved in a police stop. And one quote I found is, a black man in Kansas City, 25 or younger, has a 28% chance of being stopped, while a similar white male only has a 12% chance. And police searches. Black and Hispanic drivers are 3 times more likely than white drivers to be searched during traffic stops than white drivers. And police using force during arrests. This is another quote that I found. A recent report by Center for Policing Equity found that police are more likely to use force like tasers, dogs, pepper spray, and physical force against black people than white people in making arrests. And that ties into police brutality and stuff like that. And with juvenile arrests, black kids are twice as likely to be arrested for crimes in school as white kids. They are also 2.5 times more likely to be arrested for curfew violations as a white kid, and additionally twice as likely as a white child to be arrested for any crime, and much more likely to be held in detention than white kids. And this is according to the Sentencing Project, which is something that I suggest all of you look up. It has a lot of resources and educational material to look at. And with arrests in the transgender community, hundreds of thousands of gay and transgender youth are arrested or detained every year, and more than 60% are Black or Latino. And as we said earlier, 13% of people in America, as to my knowledge, I'm not sure if that's the correct statistic, are Black in America. And having 60% of them, of the transgender youth, being arrested, that makes absolutely no sense. So far, are there any questions, comments, or concerns? No? And then for arrest for drugs. So this is one where, this is what a lot of people talk about when it comes to racism. People are like, well, Black people use more drugs, but that's not true. White people and Black people are just, they use drugs the same amount, and that's been proven. And so 40% of drug arrests are not for selling drugs, but for the possession of marijuana. White and Black Americans are equally as likely to use marijuana. And Black Americans are 3.7 times more likely to be arrested for it. This charge stays with them for the rest of their life. It affects their chance of getting a job, loans, housing, and essentially their future. And the whole prison system is something that I would like to talk about another day. And so prosecution charges. Federal prosecutors are almost twice as likely to file charges carrying mandatory minimum sentences for Black Americans than white Americans accused of the same crimes. And Black women are incarcerated at a rate nearly 3 times higher than white women. And over 65% of prisoners serving life without parole for nonviolent offenses are Black. And like I said earlier, having a criminal record hurts the chance for someone to get a job. It hurts Black men even worse. In fact, white men with a criminal record have a better chance of getting a positive response in a job search than Black men without a criminal record. I think you guys have all known that white friend that has multiple marijuana charges, maybe not, but has marijuana charges and gets the job, no problem. But if it was a Black friend like that, then it wouldn't be the same situation. And then another issue I'd like to talk about at another meeting is the whole voting equality. And so the impact of this is devastating. For example, 1 out of every 13 African Americans have lost their right to vote due to felony disenfranchisement, which is something we'll talk about in another meeting, versus 1 in every 56 non-Black voters. So to kind of conclude, there are so many other ways systemic racism affects Black, Hispanic, and Asian Americans in this country every single day. These are just a few that I mentioned, but here's what we can do. We can have a conversation like what we're doing right now. We can do our own research, listen to podcasts, read books, sign petitions, and vote. And this is a really good quote I found. Johnson outlined 3 steps people can take to address systemic racism. We must acknowledge that racism actually exists, get involved with organizations that are fighting it, and finally elect leaders and policymakers who won't reinforce or support structurally racist policies. So I think that's all the slides I had, but that is a very heavy topic, and I would like to talk about that. Let me see if I can stop my share. All right, thoughts or comments or questions?
That was really good, educational.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just crazy to think about, like wow sort of feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
yeah, I agree with Grace. Like, it's just heart-wrenching. You can even...
It's basically, you go to school, you are labeled as a troublemaker in class. You don't get to take the AP IB classes because you're not like seen as being qualified for that. You do something, the same thing as a white kid would do, and you get suspended or expelled. You don't want to go to school. You may drop out of school. You don't go to college. So what are you going to do? You can't find housing because you didn't go to college. You can't get a job because you didn't go to college. So what are you going to do? You can't get good housing because you don't have enough money. And you're probably going to get arrested at some point because the justice system is against all Black people. You're going to get pulled over for nothing. Maybe a white kid and a Black kid are both going to be driving with weed in their car, but the Black kid is going to be searched. And so the system has set them up in every single way to fail.
Yeah. To me, like, I know one of my friends who was Black in high school got suspended for a week because of marijuana. I don't exactly remember what the details were, but I think the amount of white people I knew that smoked weed sometimes in the school bathrooms,
I know.
that never got a single charge.
Yep.
Is just so, it just makes me sad. And the thing that is so hard is that we had a Black like our like Carborough Chapel City School system head was a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
The principal in our school was Black, and the vice principal in our school was also Black, and still that happened.
Yeah.
So it's so hard, even if you put Black people in power, sometimes the system is just so rigged that it's very hard to go against it.
Yep. So what do you think that we can do to like help this problem? I feel like helpless when it comes to this because it's like such like a structural thing. Like there is structural racism and systemic racism, but it's so ingrained in society, and we would basically have to completely break everything down and rebuild them and kick all the racists out in order to make this stop. And so I want to figure out something that we can do besides like signing petitions or voting, because that feels like nothing.
I mean, just find your local representative or senator. It doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, and just make them try to write some kind of legislation maybe about this. I don't know if there's any kind of legislation that you can make, but there's got to be something, you know.
I know.
Well, it's like we got to totally like what you said, like scratch like everything and like completely start over. We need to like put the right people in power instead of keeping people in power who are like doing unethical things and not like actually like caring about people.
And that's where voting comes in. I mean, our vote is our most powerful tool, but
so is like all these organizations who are like working to create change in like their community too, and like protest and like